Hello all, welcome to session 58 of CSharp.net training series. In this session, I am going to explain and practically demonstrate about exception handling in C Sharp. So let's get started. Before understanding what is exception handling, we have to first understand what is meant by an exception. Exception is a runtime error. That means the error that comes when you run the programs. Okay, when you write the programs, if you are getting an error, that is a compile time error. But when you get an error when you run after you run the program, that is a runtime error. All these kind of runtime errors are known as exceptions. I'll give you some examples of the exceptions. Okay, so some three examples I'll give you one by one. First, I'll give you an example for divide by zero exception. So for that here, I'll come here and under this namespace, I'll create a class, public class. I'll say demo class. Inside the demo class, I'll create a main method. I'll say public. I'll type svm and say tab two times. I'll press tab key two times. You see, main method will be auto generated. I don't have to type it entirely. Inside this main method, I'll create two variables. For one of the variable, I'll assign a value, and for other variable, I'll not assign anything. In the next line, I'll say b is equal to a divided by 0. Okay, I'll try to divide this variable with 0 in the next line. So is it possible to divide any number by 0 either in mathematics or in any programming language? Not possible. Okay, this will give you an exception. Okay, you see now while I'm writing this code, I'm not getting any error here. Okay, the C Sharp program or this Visual Studio is not suggesting me that there is an error here. Okay, but after I run the code, I'll get an exception here. So after this, I'll try to print this b. Okay, console.writeLine. I'll try to print the value of b, and here I'll write one more statement, that is console.writeLine, end of the program. Okay, end of the program, and here I'll write console.readLine. Like this, I'll write some sample code here. So here, but at this line only, at this line itself, we are going to get an exception, right? At this line itself, we are going to get an exception. That is a runtime error. After I run the code in the output, I'll get an exception here. Okay. So these statements will not be executed because of that error. Run the code. You see, I got an exception in this line. Divide by 0 exception. We have attempted to divide this variable a by 0, which is not possible, and you got an exception known as divide by 0 exception. So this what is one of the exception. It's a runtime error, guys. Okay, when you run the code only, you'll get this kind of exception. Let me close this. I'll give you other examples of the exceptions now. So here now I'll demonstrate index out of bounds exception. So for this, I'll take arrays, concept of arrays. So integer array AR is equal to new int of 3. I'll say 3. New int of 3, and here I'll say AR of 0 is equal to 9. AR of 1 is equal to 5. AR of index 2 is equal to some 7. Again AR of 3, which is not possible, right? You see the size of the array is only 3, but I'm trying to create one more element in the array. After 3 elements, I'm going to create one more element in the array, for which it should give as an exception. Okay, I'll say AR of 3 is equal to 4, and here I'll say AR of 2 or something. Okay, so this code will not be executed. Okay, this code will not be executed because at this line itself we will get a runtime error. Okay, run this code. Once I run the code, you see we'll get an exception at this line. AR of 3 is equal to 4. Index out of range exception. Okay, what is this exception we got? So it is index, it's not index out of bounds, it is index out of range exception. Okay, small mistake here in the notes. Index out of range exception will get, okay. So hope you understood what is index out of range exception. even though that element cannot exist, right? The size of the array is only 3, but if you're trying to assign some value to the fourth element of the array, this kind of exceptions will come. Now, format exception. Next one is a format exception. So I'll do one thing here. Uh, I'll try to receive an input from the user. Okay, so I'll say CW, that is tap tap, console.writeLine will come. Enter any number. Okay, I'll say enter any number. Enter your otherwise current salary. Otherwise, okay, enter your current salary or something. I'll say. So I want to receive this as an input from the user. Okay, so for that, what I will do, how to receive it from the user, console dot read line. How to say console dot read line, and this will intake the input from the user, and that input will come in the form of string format. Okay, string user input I'll say. Otherwise, after that I'll convert this user input into the integer format. Integer current salary. Okay, current salary is equal to int dot parse of user input I'll say. Okay, I'll convert that integer. The convertible string, I'll convert that into the integer. That's what I'm trying to do here. I would like to print that salary. Okay, that current salary I would like to print. Okay, so here what happens is, whatever the user enters, if that particular text or whatever the number is convertible to the actual integer, then only this will happen. Okay, run this code. We'll take the positive case and negative case also. Current salary, if I give as 12 lakhs, otherwise, yeah, 12 lakhs. Press enter. You see, current salary is printed, end of the program got printed properly. But what if the user doesn't enter the salary in the form of number? Okay, 2000 like this. Okay, 2000 like this he entered. Okay, he or she entered, and press enter. You see, here the moment I press enter here, I got an exception known as format exception. Okay, which cannot be converted, right? The text cannot be converted to integer. Okay, so we got a format exception here. Done. So this is an example for the format exception. So I gave you 3 examples. One for divide by 0 exception, other for index out of range exception, and other for format exception. So all these are examples of the exceptions which are nothing but the runtime errors which only occur after you run the code. So what is the problem with these exceptions? The problem with the exceptions is that the next statements will not be executed. Okay, the moment exception occurs here, the moment we run the code and exception occurs, the remaining lines will not be executed. You see, if I run this code, if the user gives a valid one, no problem. The user gives a valid one, the complete code got executed. You see, till the end it got executed. No problem. All the remaining lines, this line, this line, this line, here no exception has come, so all the lines got executed. What if we run the code and user gave some ABCD like this? The moment I press enter, you see the execution stopped here. Because of this exception, the execution stopped here, and remaining lines, this particular 3 lines didn't get executed. Okay, the 3 lines didn't get executed. The execution stopped at this. That's a problem with the exception. Okay, remaining lines of code after the exception, okay, which come after the exception won't run. That's the problem with the exception. So if you still want to run the remaining lines of the code even despite of getting an exception, then we have to use exception handling. Okay, a mechanism to handling the exception we have to use. If you still want to run the remaining lines of the code after the exception occurs, then we have to use exception handling. So let's use this exception handling in order to handle the exception where you will make the remaining lines of the code execute even after the despite of the exception comes. Okay, so we have to use try catch blocks. Okay, to handle exception we have to use try catch blocks. How to use try catch blocks and all I'll explain now. So here you see this particular line is probable to exception, right? This particular line is probable to exception. So I'll put these 2 lines inside the try block. Okay, so I'll write code like this. Try to handle the exception we have to use try catch blocks. Okay, So this ending of this try block should happen after these two lines, whatever the lines of code which are probable to exception, right? So there you have to surround that with try block. And wherever you want to handle the exception, you have to put catch block. Catch. Which exception is possible here? Format exception. So format exception E, and write like this. So in this case, what happens? Remaining lines of code will be executed. Okay, end of the program will be printed and read line also will happen. So what I will do here is I'll to handle this exception, I can write a normal print statement. Okay, exception occurred. Which exception occurred? Format exception. Okay, format exception occurred and handled. Okay, and handled like this. Handled by whom? Handled by try catch blocks. Okay, like this I'll write a statement. Handled in catch block also you can say. Handled in catch block. So what happens here is if you surround this statement which is probable to exception, right, inside the try block, right? So what happens if an exception really comes here in one of the statements try block, if the exception comes, automatically the exception will not stop the program. Okay, instead the exception will go and fall into this as an object, guys. Okay, an object for the exception will be created and thrown here. That object will be catched by this object reference of this format exception class. Okay, so for each and every exception here, for each and every exception, possible exception here, there is a predefined class in C Sharp. Okay, for handling the format exception, we have format exception class. For handling the index out of range exception, we have index out of range exception class, like that. Okay, so here this object for that particular exception will be thrown and will be catched by the object reference of this format exception class in this case, in this example. So once the exception is catched here, exception thrown in the form of object is catched here. Okay, then here the catch block will be executed, and this particular statement inside the catch block will be executed, which is nothing but a print statement. This is how we are handling the exception, and remaining lines of code will run. Okay, so run this code. This time, instead of giving a proper salary, I'll give a like some text and all. Press enter. You see, format exception occurred and handled in catch block. End of the program. You see, till the end of the program, it got executed. This is how we can handle the exceptions using try catch blocks. Okay, this is how we can use try catch blocks to handle the exception. So if you want to print the message, okay, so message of the exception, so what you can do is here you can write console dot write line e dot message. Okay, e dot message, object reference dot message means the message related to the exception, what exception got occurred will be printed. Let's run this and see what message will be printed. Press enter. You see, format exception occurred and handled. This is printed by us, and this is exception. Input string was not in a correct format. Okay. So input string, whatever the user has input is not in a correct format. It should be in a proper numerical format. Then only it can be converted to the integer. Otherwise, you'll get format exception, right? That actual message got printed here. So similarly, you can also print more details with dot print e dot stack trace. Okay, I think that is the one. E dot stack trace, if you say, you will get more details, not only just the message. So here I'll comment this out for a while, okay, so that you can focus only on this line. Run this code. I'll give invalid text. You see this kind of this is stack trace means this kind of things only. You see, end of the program came means the remaining lines of code got executed, and stack trace means this much things details got executed. Okay. So it this particular string to number and parse in parse, all the details are coming here. Okay, that is what is a stack trace. It will give you more details in the output. So otherwise, you can only print E, guys. Okay, so object reference directly you can print. This is also another way. Run this and type some text and press enter. So same stack trace came, right? And here, apart from the stack trace, you also got the message also. Input string was not in a correct format, and what is the type of the exception. More details you got. Okay, so printing is a better way. Fine. So you can also print E. Okay, location of the exception, type of the exception, and message of the exception. Everything will come if you print E. Instead of E dot message or E dot stack trace, if you just print E, you'll get more details like this. Okay, not just the message, but the location and location of the exception. Here only location of the exception is coming. Here only message of the exception is coming. But when I print E, location, type, and message of the exception are coming. Fine. So to handle different type of exceptions, we have different classes. To handle the format exception, we have format exception class we have to use. For handling the divided by zero exception, we can use divide by zero. I'll show you each and everything. I'll show you. Okay. So remove this part for now. So even remove this part. For example, I'll go back to the same example. Int a is equal to 5, comma b is equal to a divided by 0. I'll say put a semicolon. B is equal to a divided by 0. Now here you'll get an exception known as divide by 0 exception you'll get. Okay. So this line is probable to the exception. So what we'll do is we have to surround this particular line with a try catch block. So there is shortcut for try catch blocks for writing the try catch block. Just type try here and press tab 2 times. Okay. You see entire try catch block will be generated. This statement you cut it from here and paste it inside the try block. Okay. And here in the catch block, so here you write the type divide by 0 exception E. Okay, like this you can write. So now press enter here and say console.writeLine. Just directly print E so that all the exception details will come. If in case of exception, what will happen? The catch block will be executed and okay. So this particular details of the exception will be printed with, right, what will happen if you print E. Okay, type of the exception, name of the exception, message of the exception, everything will come. Now run this code, definitely exception will come at this line and it will be handled also. You see, exception came and it got handled. Type of the exception, name of the message of the exception, and location of the exception, and end of the program. Everything got printed. Similarly, we can handle other exception, that is array index out of bounds exception. I think I don't have to show you practically, okay, because you understood by this time how to handle the exceptions. Whether it can be divided by 0 or format exception, I showed you. But you see, uh, if you're not sure like which type of exception is going to be occurred here, if you're not sure like whether it is divided by 0 exception, divided by 0 exception, or format exception, or array index out of range exception, if you're not sure, in that case, instead of providing this, you can put something known as simply exception. Okay, just put exception here, that's it. You're not sure the specific exception, what exception this particular statement is going. Sometimes what happens is this statement may throw this exception or different exception. Okay, so in that case, I'll tell you what I mean here. Okay, so remove this. I'll create an example for that. We don't know which type of exception will come. So here I'll take this B as an input. Okay, so for that what I'll do is I'll say console.writeLine. Console.writeLine. Here I'll mention enter a number. Okay, enter a number. And here I'll say console.readLine. I'll take this input from the user. Console.readLine. This input I am taking from the user. Here I'll say B is equal to. This is what I want to do. But here I need to parse it, right? First of all, I need to parse it. So I have to convert that into number. Parse b.parse of console.readLine. I have to take it like this. This is fine. So then int c is equal to a divided by b. Okay, this is what I want to do. So there are two possibilities where if the user enters 0 here, okay, to into the b, the user inputs 0, divided by 0 error will come. So instead of giving a number, if the user inputs some text, this particular statement will give you which exception? Format exception. We don't know which type of exception will come. I'll show you two cases. Okay. So in one of the case, just see here, enter a number. If the user has entered a proper number, no problem. End of the program is coming. So there's no problem. Here we are not printing the value of C anyhow. So console.writeLine, I'm just printing the value of C. So now run this again. If a user gives a proper number 4, and you see for one time the number is getting divided. So end of the program, everything is happening properly. But if the user enters 0 in this case, try to divide the number by 0, we got an exception here. Divide by 0 exception, remaining lines didn't get executed. Okay. So in other cases, if you run this code and user instead of giving a number, he has entered the text. Again, we'll get another type of exception known as format exception we got. Okay. Format exception. Sometimes you are getting divide by 0 exception. Sometimes you are getting format exception. That's the problem. So we don't know which exception will come, right? Specifically, we cannot handle. If you handle only this exception, that is divide by 0, if format exception comes, exception won't be handled, right? That's a problem. So no matter which exception comes, if you still want to handle, what you can do is, so surround these two things with a try catch block. So just type try here and press tab, and this structure will come. Cut this part and put that inside the try block, which is probable to the exception, and here in the catch block say, here say exception E, print E, that's it. Here C, I have to make it global, otherwise it cannot be accessible here. So I have to make C global. Int C is equal to okay. Yeah, double declaration I'll remove. Yeah, now it's okay. Okay, still it is not. What is the problem? C is equal to 0, I'll say for now. Okay, enter a number. Yeah, here I'm taking the input. So by default C is 0, and after that that's okay. So I have to initialize this, otherwise it will give an error here. Fine guys, okay. So here I can put divided by 0, divide by 0, or I can put format only. But what if other type of exception comes? That's a problem, right? Instead of providing divide by 0 or format exception, I'll simply provide exception with a parent, okay? Exception class is a parent class of, as you can see the exception hierarchy here. There's an exception hierarchy here, guys. Under the exception, we have two types, application exception and system exception. Under application exception, there is nothing. Under system exception, we have divided by 0 exception. That means to all these exception types, exception is a parent, right? You can say to all these exception types, exception is a parent. So this is what is exception hierarchy. So if you give a, if you can store, you can store the object of the child class into the parent class, right? As you have already seen in the previous sessions. So this should be possible, and it can handle no matter which type of exception will come. It can be divided by 0, or it will handle if it is a, what you can say, if it is a format exception also, this particular catch block will handle it. Okay, that's what is a funda. Fine. So here I'll put this line also here itself, better. Okay, so these two lines and this line I'll give here. In that case, I don't have to take it out also. Actually, I've taken it out. It's not required. Done. Okay, now run the code. Let's run the code. So enter a number. If I'm giving a proper number like 4, no problem. Everything will work fine. What if I'm giving a number 0 here? Divide by 0 exception should come, but it should be handled now. You see, it got handled. Divide by 0 exception, attempted to divide by 0. At this particular location it happened. End of the program came, means it got handled. Next, instead of giving a number, if the user has given the text, you see, format exception has come, it got handled, and because of that, end of the program came at the end. Okay, this came means the exception got handled. No matter which type of exception comes in the try block, the catch block is able to handle because of this exception. Okay, instead of using the specific exception, we are using the exception. Okay, so exception class. That's all about the exception class, guys. Even there is one more way, that is we can create multiple catch blocks. Okay, here only one catch block is there, right? Instead we can create multiple catch blocks like this. First we'll try to handle the specific exceptions that divide by zero exception E. If this is not handled, then I'll write better like this catch. This is also fine. This is also fine. Another catch block we can write catch. Yeah, this time format exception E console.writeLine E I'll print. If it is not any of these two types of exceptions, then finally at the end I'll type catch which exception? Direct exception. Okay. If not any of the specific exceptions, at the end as a savior, we'll be writing exception E console.writeLine E. That's it. Okay. This is another way, guys. Okay. So here a particular specific exception will be handled by the catch block. If the specific exception is not coming in any of these specific catch blocks, then finally exception class will take care of the stuff. Okay. If a different exception is coming, the final catch block will take care of the stuff. Okay. This is also possible. Creating multiple catch blocks. Okay. So what if the exception does not occur in the try block? What will happen, guys? In this case, if the exception doesn't occur, if I run the code and if the exception doesn't occur, okay, enter a number and we'll get a valid number and press enter. Exception doesn't occur means what happens? The catch blocks will be skipped. None of the catch blocks will be executed. If the exception doesn't come in any of these three lines in the try block, this catch blocks will not be executed at all. That's what will happen. Okay. But if a exception in any of the statements in the try block occurs means it will jump the control to the catch blocks, okay, without executing the remaining statements in the try block. For example, here guys, here int.parse is there. At this statement itself, okay, at this line itself, we got an exception. You see, string format is there. It cannot be converted to integer, right? So here itself, we will get an exception. Here itself, we'll get an exception. So remaining two lines will not be executed. You see, if this particular line in the try block is giving the exception means the remaining two lines in the try block will not be executed. A control will come from this line to directly which line? So it will go for this line. If it's not possible, it will go for format exception and okay, like that. Okay. So control will jump from this line to this line. Okay. If these two lines will be skipped. If an exception comes in one of the lines in the try block, the remaining lines in the try block will not be executed. Later lines in the try block will not be executed after the exception. Okay. That's how to understand. So if the exception is not handled by the catch block, the program terminates without executing remaining code in the program. Okay. So for example, here, let's say you are getting a format exception, but you put the catch block for the, I'll remove this extra catch blocks. Okay. Let's say here you are getting format exception, but here catch block is only having divide by zero exception. Exception will not be handled, right? The object of the format exception will be thrown, but that cannot be catched by the object difference of the divide by zero. So hence exception will not be handled, and again the program will terminate abruptly because handling is not happening in that case. Run this code. Intentionally I'll give some text and press enter. You see exception is coming here. Because of the exception came, the handling of that exception has not happened. Format exception came, but here which exception we are handling? We are handling the divide by zero exception. Hence the program has stopped and remaining lines of the code didn't get executed. Okay. And there is one more block, guys, that is finally block. Okay, there is one more block known as finally block. So here I'll put exception first of all. Exception, so that it can handle any type of the exception. That's fine. Then we have the finally block. Okay, what is this finally block means? The finally block will be at the end of the catch block. Okay, after the try block is done, after the catch block is done, finally here another block will be there. That is known as finally block. No matter the exception comes or doesn't come, the finally whatever the statements you write inside the final block, they will get executed. You see here, I'll simply say inside finally block. Inside finally block. This statement is printing or not, let's see. So what if the exception doesn't come? Okay, we gave a proper number. What if the exception doesn't come? Still finally block will be executed. Catch block will be skipped if the exception doesn't come, but finally block will be executed. What if the exception comes? Catch block will be executed. Along with that, finally block also will be executed. Okay. No matter what, whether the exception comes or doesn't come, final block will get executed. Guys, run this code. Enter any number it is saying. So just give a proper number here. You see, inside finally block got executed. Inside finally block got executed, and end of the program got printed. That's fine. And what if next time you intentionally give 0 here? This time exception will come. Catch block will be executed. Finally block also will be executed. You see, inside final block is still executed even on despite of the exception. Whether the exception comes or doesn't come here, occur or doesn't occur here, finally block will be must and must will be must executed. Okay, will be executed must by the program. Okay, so that's what is the finally block, guys. But what is the purpose? Okay, irrespective of whether the exception occurs or not, the finally block gets executed in the code. And but what is the purpose? Generally, final block is used to close the objects, guys. Okay, so I have come, for example, this kind of statement is inside a control. I'll copy this sample code. Okay, so let's say this particular statement is inside the try block. Okay, let's assume that this particular statement is inside a try block. So here, guys, this particular object need to be closed. F right object need to be closed. Okay, so it's a good practice to close the objects. Okay, this kind of objects can be closed in the binary block. F dead dot. So I think this should be global. I'll say null here for now. Remove this. Done. And here it will be accessible now. Dot close. We have to close these objects, guys. Okay. Generally, it is a good practice to close. It's not compulsory. It's a good practice to close the objects. So no matter what, whether the exception comes in the try block or doesn't come, we still have to close this particular object. In that case, we'll use finally block. Okay. That's the main advantage or use of the finally block is to close the objects. The objects that are created in the try block need to be closed in the finally block because finally blocks get executed irrespective of whether the exception occurs or doesn't occur. No matter what, the object will be closed. That's what is the finally block all about. Okay. So now types of exceptions. We have the different types of the exceptions like system exception and application exceptions. Okay. You can categorize exceptions into the system exceptions and application exceptions. Under system exceptions, we will get all this, whatever the exceptions we have discussed so far, right? This is index out of range exception, guys. Let me type range here. Index out of range exception. Then we have divide by 0 or format exception and other exceptions fall into the system exception. And we have a application exception also. So like this, we can programmatically, we can throw this application exception. I'll give an example for this. When can we throw an application exception? I'll throw. So here, let's write some logic. I'll clear all this stuff. Let's say there is a children park and okay, so the children who are aged less than 10 will be allowed into the park. If not, exception should be thrown. So int age, okay, age is equal to, you can collect this from the user otherwise, okay, console dot read line, I'll say console dot read line. I'll say int dot parse of int dot parse, we have to convert that, right? Int dot parse of console dot read line, I'll say. And here I'll give a hint to the user during the runtime. Enter your child's age. Okay, if the child's age is less than or equal to 10, then fine, it should allow into the park. It should allow the child into the park. Otherwise, the child should not be allowed. Okay. If age is less than or equal to 10, then welcome to the park. Okay. Welcome to the park. Else, I want to throw an exception here. So I want to throw an exception, guys. So I'll throw this application exception. Okay. Throw new, like this we have to throw manually. Throw new application exception. Okay. Throw new application exception. Here I'll give a custom message saying your child's age is more than 10 years. hence not allowed to our park. Not allowed to our park. Put a semicolon at the end. That's it. We are good. Now let's run this code. Enter your child's age. If you give the child's age as 5, welcome to the park is coming. Let's give some child age like 15. 15. You see exception is coming. That is application exception is thrown. Okay. Application exception is thrown. Your child's age is more than 10 years, hence not allowed to our park. Message also is coming. Okay. So this is what is application exception. Okay. So by writing some programming logic, we can throw an exception. Okay. With the help of the programming logic also, we can throw an exception. So such kind of exceptions are application exceptions. Okay. Application exception or application. You can say that as application exception. Okay. So under types of exception, we have system exceptions like this predefined exceptions like this is also predefined only, but based on the logic we'll throw. So here index out of range divide by 0 are system exceptions, whereas application exceptions are application exception here. Okay, using programming logic we can write. And now we have the exception hierarchy. As I already told you, exception is a parent of all the application, and for application and system exception is a exception can handle the application exception. Exception class can also handle the system exception because exception is a parent of all this type of exceptions. Okay. Finally, guys, last one shortcut I already showed you. Like if you type try and press tap, okay, try catch block will be auto generated for you. That I have already shown you. The final one, guys, the final one is about the custom exception. We can create our own exception, guys. Okay, we can create our own exception and throw it whenever it is required. So how to create our own exception, I'll show you in a while. Okay. So here, guys, I'll do one thing. I'll clean out this code. Clean out this code. Now here, to create a customized exception, I have to create a class with exception name. Let me create a class. Public class. Okay. I'll say sample exception. I'm just giving the name of the exception as sample itself. Okay. But I have to inherit exception class. Okay. Exception like this I have to write. The name of the exception I'm going to customize the exception that I'm going to create is a sample exception. The sample exception is going to inherit the exception. Okay. So inside this I'll create one more method. I'll create a method, guys, that is a public. It's not a method actually, it's a constructor, you can say. Okay, it's not a method, guys. Sorry, it's not a method, it's a constructor. I have to say constructor will have the same name as the class, right? I have to create a constructor, and beside this constructor, I have to provide something like this colon base, like this. I have to provide. That's it. Okay, that's it. Nothing much. The exception, customized exception has been created. Okay, this is a format of creating the customized exception. This is the name of the customized exception. So wherever you want to throw, you can throw. Okay, if I'll say otherwise, I'll say int a is equal to some 5. If a is greater than 10, I want to throw that exception. Okay, based on some logic, I want to throw this customized exception. Then I'll throw an exception. Throw new sample exception. Okay, throw new sample exception. I'll say this will throw the sample exception. Okay, this will throw the sample exception. I created the sample exception, my own exception. It's not a user defined exception. Sorry, it's not a predefined exception. It's a user defined exception that I as a user has created this exception. I can throw my own exception here. Okay, based on my logic and all, I can create my own exception and throw my own exception. Okay, so all my rules kind of thing. So if a is greater than 10, then only this will exception. Otherwise, it will work properly. Let's run this code. So end of the program got printed properly. Okay, so what if a value is 15? Now run this code. This time it will throw sample exception. This is sample exception is thrown. My own customized exception is thrown. That is sample exception is thrown. Okay. So this is what is a customized exception, guys. Okay, custom exception. You can say you can create your own exceptions and throw them based on your requirements. So this is all about the exception handling. I covered a lot of topics in exception handling, starting from what is an exception, different examples for the exceptions, and what will happen if you don't handle the exception, what's the problem, and why we have to handle the exception, and how to handle using try catch blocks, and how to print the messages of the exception, and how to print the location of the exception, and how to print the name, type, and the location of the exception. And I explained about the exception class, which is a parent class of all the other exception classes, all the other type of exceptions in C Sharp. How can we implement multiple catch blocks? Okay, and what happens if exception occurs on exception doesn't occur, all the stuff. What is finally block and why it is required explained. Then I explained about the different types of exceptions, exception hierarchy explained, and custom exception explained, and shortcut also for creating this try catch block also I covered. So so that's all for this session, guys. In the next session, I'm going to cover another C#.NET topic for you. Till then, see you. Bye bye.